obviously, there's no way to take in the tremendous loss of life and also just the brutality. You know, the Nova Music Festival, it's out there. It's a very kind of dry, but then there are trees, and it's as open, almost like a field of trees, of small trees. And you can imagine these young people just having a party, enjoying themselves, and then to see just, sign after sign with a remembrance of all of these young people, like a field of people mowed down by the brutal Hamas terrorists. So that was really dramatic. And, walking through there, it was just sort of like a holy sight almost. Going to the kibbutz, I went to Kfar Aza. That was different because we had a guide in that case, and it was a woman who was a survivor. She wasn't there on the day of the actual attack, but her family was, and she told all kinds of stories. And I think the biggest takeaway that she had was that she no longer believed that she could sit and peacefully have tea in the big field between her kibbutz and Gaza, where the Palestinians lived, whom many of whom she had known, and have tea and live together in harmony. But she said very clearly that I need them to have security and prosperity in order for us Israeli Jews to have security as well. So it was a very somber visit. And of course, this anniversary just dredges up all of the anxiety, which has not been put to rest over the past year. I think that much is clear.
Evelyn, we've frequently heard the events of October 7th, the attack on October 7th, compared to 9/11, that this was Israel's 9/11. And some see it, in fact, impacting by many magnitudes larger when you consider the population and the percentage of people whose lives were taken on this day. How many more 9/11s will it take to end this?
Well, the 9/11 comparison is actually pretty good, Joe, because first of all, while there were warnings, the government didn't take proper action in advance. So there were intelligence failures, just as we had intelligence failures here in the US in the run up to 9/11. The second comparison that's apt is that it took first responders a while to get to the scene, but then they actually couldn't save very many people. So the killing was very quick. And in that respect, it's similar. And then, of course, the shock to the entire society, the fact that Israel, a country that has the strongest military in the Middle East, the nuclear power in the Middle East, the country that we have always, the United States, provided military assistance to in order to make sure that they have what we call a qualitative edge militarily, that somehow they could be vulnerable to such an attack, such an existential attack. I think that is just like 9/11. How do we avoid it? I think we need to make sure that for once and for all, there is a solution to the Palestinians' right to self-determination. And as the woman that I spoke to in Kfar Aza, the kibbutz, said, and actually Palestinians that also I met with in Ramallah, they also spoke about the need for security for both sides. I think we need to find a way back to a two-state solution. It will be very hard because right now the current Israeli government has been talking about a one-state solution. And the far-right members of Netanyahu's government, they're not interested in a two-state solution. But the only way to have lasting peace is for the Palestinians also to see their rights respected.
Well, and that lasting peace may feel far away to many as we are seeing, instead of a cooling in the conflict, an escalation in it. As Joe and I were mentioning, not only were rockets fired at Israel, but Israel is continuing to conduct its strike operations in southern Lebanon. As we consider, and you just mentioned the intelligence failures that led to the events, or at least were a contributing factor to what happened on October 7th, when we consider the safety of Israel, which clearly was not safe on that day, is Israel safer now that it has, to at least a certain extent, been able to attack the capabilities of those that would threaten it, including Hamas and Hezbollah? Or because of their actions, has it actually created more danger in the region, including from Iran, that sent missiles Israel's way last week?
Yeah, I would say, Kelly, if you're looking at the threat picture at the moment, Israel has bought itself some time. So the Iranian proxies, Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in the coming from the north, so coming from Lebanon, they have been beaten down badly. Even the Israeli defense minister said in September that Hamas was no longer a real, capable military threat to the state of Israel. I don't know what his latest assessment is. Clearly, Hezbollah has been incredibly weakened. But let's not forget that the real threat is coming from Iran. Iran is using these two groups plus the Houthis in Yemen to attack Israel so that it doesn't get into a direct war with Israel. That appears to perhaps have changed, and that would put Israel in a more dangerous situation if indeed it did get into direct war with Iran potentially.
Well, some think this is an opportunity to strike Iran, to change the order and the balance of power in the Middle East. Evelyn, what should Israel do as it calculates its next move?
Well, Joe, I think that Israel, together with the United States, we are their treaty ally. We should be talking about how do we bring about regime change without invading Iran, and putting pressure on Iran using military force, using diplomatic pressure, using all of our other allies in the Middle East is an important part of this. And we haven't seen a strategy articulated by the Israeli government. There is a bit of an opportunity here when it comes to the nuclear program, because the biggest threat to Israel is that Iran gets a nuclear weapons program, which means that Iran can neuter Israel's advantage in the nuclear arena if they did come to blows, direct war. And so we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapons program for that reason. Also, because we don't want more countries in the Middle East deciding, and around the world, frankly, deciding that they also want their nuclear programs. That makes the world a lot more dangerous. So there may be calculations going on. I think they should be behind the scenes and not worked out through the media that pertain to the nuclear facilities in particular.
Well, as you describe something that could make the world more dangerous, I think it's fair to say, Evelyn, that the world feels pretty dangerous already, and it could be a very dangerous world that the next president of the United States inherits. How do you, if we operate under the assumption that this conflict will not be resolved when the next president is inaugurated, how could the nature of it change depending on who it is in the White House and what kind of administration we'll be looking at?
Kayleigh, if it's Kamala Harris, I believe that she would be more engaged in trying to solve the conflict. First of all, there's the personal element. Her husband is Jewish. Second of all, there's the reality that for the United States, we need to protect Israel's right to exist, and it's really in jeopardy right now. So that's a U.S. national security interest. We also want to protect as much as we can stability in the Middle East, and as I said, address the nuclear and terrorist threat posed by Iran. So I believe that she'll get more engaged. Right now, the Biden administration, frankly, is probably somewhat hamstrung by the fact that we have upcoming elections, and anything they do, if it doesn't turn out in the short run, if it causes friction or controversy in the short run, it could be bad for Kamala Harris. But I do think that if the vice president were to win, she would be more engaged. With regard to Donald Trump, we know that he's generally given a carte blanche. He's been in office before as president, so he's given a carte blanche to the far right and to Netanyahu in Israel before. That doesn't, frankly, make me optimistic, because he would be more willing than to go along with what they call the one-state solution, which means essentially just putting the Palestinians in these kinds of settlements in Gaza and the West Bank, which, as we've seen, is just a powder keg and a recipe for more conflict. So I think that the hands-off approach of Donald Trump would be the much more dangerous one for the U.S. and for Israel.
As we consider the preparations underway here for a response to Iran, Evelyn, the U.S. has sent ships, it has sent missiles, fighter jets, and thousands of troops to the region. What else is needed?
I think aggressive diplomacy. We had an opportunity back in the fall when the Israeli defense minister was saying that Hamas is severely degraded and it's no longer an organized military threat to the state of Israel, to negotiate a release of the hostages who, this is the anniversary of them being held in captivity. That was an opportunity that was lost, but it's not permanently lost. And so I think that's what we need to focus on right now, trying to get those hostages out. Whatever short-term deal you have to make with Hamas, I think, again, as long as it's a prisoner exchange and within the normal bounds of this kind of negotiation, should be worth it to the Israeli government, certainly to the Israeli people, and to the U.S. government.